So here we go again. So this time I have my notes here. So this time around I'd like to do some kind of, all those trendy videos of reactions to when people, play some music or sing, except that this time around I would like to kind of shift the model a little bit, and I'm doing some kind of reflection of. So it's, as opposed to reactions video, reflections is a commentary about how a topic, or in this case is of a podcast, applies, relates, or resonates to my life. So I would be musing throughout this video. And first episodes, I'm going to take an episode from Diary of a CEO by Steven Bartlett. The man needs no introduction. He's really the first podcast host to me that is able to hold a safe space where every guest can be vulnerable and open up honestly, and in the process establishing true connections with the audience. And because his video tends to be long, I choose the shortest episode. It's episode 172 with Joe Suggs. I apologize if I pronounced the name incorrectly, but yeah, it's because it's the shortest, because you can imagine that if I'm reacting or reflecting on this already a long video, it would be even longer. So the format would be simply like, it would be simply a frame when I'll watch on my iPad and take some notes along with some occasional comments from my side or musings. There won't be no picture in picture, because it may not even have the clearest audio or editing, for two reasons. Because I'm a 40-something dad who doesn't follow the nitty-gritty of the latest tech, but also because I want to maintain the organic feel of this channel. Alright, so let's dig along, because this episode is one where I haven't watched before. So I'll be watching for the first time as I record this. I have my pen with me and my notes. Let's dive in.
We're getting followed by a guy. Like, my mind is panicking. I actually can't concentrate on driving because I know this person is just trying to follow us.
Strictly Finest, written a book, The West End.
An internet sensation.
Joe Suggs!
You started at 19, 20 years old. By 22, you had about 6 million subscribers.
Yeah.
That's fucking nuts.
It was so uncertain about where that was going to go. The rise, but also the fall, can happen so quick. That imposter syndrome I already had got amplified by anxiety, self-doubt. The whole thing just didn't feel real.
Diane, you met her on Strictly.
First real proper girlfriend, yeah. The further you go in that competition, the higher the pressure is and the stress gets. We saw the best and the worst of each other. I always thought it would be a very private thing. It's actually ended up being the complete opposite.
Hand on heart, do you think if you'd never started YouTube, you'd be happier overall?
Should I fast forward here?
So without further ado,
Okay.
I'm Steven Bartlett, and this is the Diary of a CEO. I hope nobody's listening, but if you are, then please keep this to yourself.
Already Joe Suggs seems like
Joe,
an interesting person.
Tell me, what are the most
He was short.
important things that I need to know about you from your early years in order to understand you? In order to understand the man that you are today.
The man I'm today. I was quite a loud child. I was a loud, annoying child growing up. When we look back through like family videos, it's quite embarrassing to watch, particularly me, because I was the sort of boy that'd be like, "Mummy, watch this," like repeating myself over and over again, and we're watching it back like, "Oh, shut up!" Like, you were an annoying child. But then at some point, I flipped, and I don't know when that was, but at some point I flipped and became a very sort of timid, quite a shy child. Always very creative. Even from an early age, I was a good drawer. I used to illustrate and draw a lot of pictures at school, which definitely came passed down from my parents, mum and dad, both very creative in their own sense. I went to a very, very small primary school in rural Wiltshire. I think there's 52 pupils in our whole school. Going from there to secondary school was a big change for me, because that was going from 52 pupils in the whole school to over 1,000. So that was a big, which probably could have a reason why I went from being sort of quite a loud, annoying child to being a lot more sort of, I'm at my depth here. I'm now a small fish in a big pond.
I read in the book, in chapter 1 of Grow, that you were quite self-deprecating at that point.
In secondary school, yeah.
Yeah.
Primary school, I feel like primary school I was a lot more confident. Everyone knew everyone very well, and I just felt like a lot more popular then. Mm-hmm. And then, moving to secondary school, it was much more like I said, it was a very different place, and that's when I first sort of encountered teasing and bullying and stuff. And I wasn't necessarily like bullied, but it was more like if there was ever like teasing going on or things that they were trying to sort of dig, I very quickly sort of realised if I'm already sort of poking fun at myself, they will get bored of trying to poke fun at me. So there's less chance of that happening.
At that age in secondary school, would you consider yourself to be a confident child?
No. Do you know what? Silently confident. Like in my head, I've always been the sort of person where I know what I'm capable of, and I know that
already at this early moment of the video, I clearly see some resemblance or commonalities between the subject of Steven's interview, which being Joe, with my life. He talks about how he was being popular in a primary school, and then moving on to secondary school, he kind of flips into someone that's more reserved. The first time he encountered bullying would be around that time, and he still maintains that kind of confidence level, except that he kind of do it. He kind of feels it more internally or silently, as he put it. And what's so interesting for me is how Stephen lays down the framework in which Joe could obviously talk about it in a really open way. And I don't know why. I don't know how he did that. I imagine there would be some kind of preliminary conversations before the taping and so on and so forth. But one thing is really obvious. Joe is someone who's comfortable speaking about his experience, and that happens more rare than you think, especially in this era where we are being inundated with a lot of podcasts, talk shows, and how often do you see someone being interviewed and speak in a really comfortable and safe way? So that's the kind of the first takeaway that comes in my mind. No notes yet. It's just my observations.
That I think, I know that I can do certain things to a good standard, and I know that I can be a good student and all this kind of stuff. But on the outside, not as confident at all. So with work and stuff, I was very confident. I was confident that I'd be able to get the grades and do well in school and things like that. But it's more the sort of social side of it. I found that a lot more difficult.
Well, if I'd asked you at that age what you wanted to be when you grew up, what would you tell me? Say like 16-ish.
16, I wanted to work in media, but I wanted to go more down the route of animation. My goal as a kid, first of all, it was an archaeologist.
Of course,
I wanted to be Indiana Jones. And then secondary school, I wanted to work for Aardman. I wanted to be an animator, like model builder, or just. I think I've got a lot of patience, and if you know what animation's like, or how long it took to make Chicken Run or Wallace and Gromit, those films take a long time to make. So I wanted to, I felt like I'd be good to do that, and I wanted to work for Aardman.
Your grades at A level were really good.
Yeah,
which was surprising because then you know most people with those kind of grades, they get A's and stuff, would then go off to university.
Yeah.
You chose not to.
No, yeah. So we did.
Notice how he spends.
I did the same. Like when you turn 16, you have to.
Or I should say, notice how Stephen invested a lot of time to establish, to set the frequency in which his guests would be really, really comfortable before he digs in really deep about the core questions that he might have, because I wouldn't imagine that those core questions would be the same questions that he is now posing to Joe about his childhood. It can't be, right? I mean, the title of this video is Growing a 10+ million YouTube following at the age of 22. So, but still, he invested a lot of time. It's 5 minutes already about his childhood. So it kind of signifies and communicates, I'm here with you, dude. So yeah, interesting.
Dentist.
Did you?
Yeah, I fell asleep every day, so
I decided to go roof thatching with my uncle. So my uncle is a roof thatcher, which is a very old traditional craft that they don't really teach anymore. It's very there's no classes you can go and take, and you can't study for it. You've got to actually go on the job and work on the job, and you learn that when the master thatcher thinks you're ready, you then go from being an apprentice to a master thatcher. And I remember my school advised that I didn't do it, but I went and did it anyway. Should have done, sorry. So I went and did that, and then I absolutely loved it. I was outside. I think what it was is I was outside. It was tough. I was lifting a lot of straw and moving things and sweeping up, but I absolutely loved it. There's something about when we finished a roof, we'd look at what we've done, and it's just that feeling. I wanted to bottle that up and be like, that's what I want for the rest of my life. So I decided that I wanted to be a roof thatcher for the rest of my life. I'm very bad at making my mind up on things as well. There's a lot going on. I'm very bad at making my mind up on stuff. So I was like, what if it doesn't work out later on down the line? I need to have A levels. So if this doesn't go to plan, or after a while I don't like it, I can at least then try out university and go back to trying to work for something in the media or Aardman or something. So, but I didn't. I always like the idea of having safety nets underneath me. So if something doesn't go to plan, it's all right. You've always got that safety net of, and that's kind of in a way what roof thatching became, because I started doing YouTube as a hobby off the back of the thatching. Did it in my spare time, and that started to take off and become a full-time career. But then I was in a way safe going into that, because I was like, if it all doesn't pan out, because this is going back to when YouTube wasn't really a career as well. So it was so uncertain about where that was going to go, but I always felt very secure in the fact that I knew that if it didn't pan out, I'll try it for a year. If it doesn't work, I can go back to a job that I genuinely really, really love. So, yeah.
The two ideas that almost in sort of collision there was this idea that you are very self-confident in your abilities, and that you've always needed a plan B.
Yeah.
I was trying to make them make sense as two kind of separate ideas, because one of them sounded a bit like self-doubt. This idea that sometimes there's a struggle to make a definitive decision, and that there's a need for a plan B. Are you someone that has self-doubt at the same time? Because I think it's possible to understand your talents, but also have doubt in the future and how things will...
He is starting to dig deeper about the seemingly contradiction between self-belief versus self-doubt. But notice that in the same occasion, he also empathizes, and he says that, I believe it's, what did he say again? He says that he says that it's normal. Let's turn around on it. Let's turn back a little bit.
Yeah.
The two ideas that are almost in sort of collision now was this idea that you are very self-confident in your abilities and that you've always needed a plan B.
Yeah.
I was trying to make them make sense as two kind of separate ideas, because one of them sounded a bit like self-doubt, this idea that sometimes there's a struggle to make a definitive decision and that there's a need for a plan B. Are you someone that has self-doubt at the same time? Because I think it's possible to understand.
He says that I think it's possible. So it's really interesting. I'm going to write this down here, because when you dig deeper, communicate how do you relate to the other person's idea or thinking. So so they won't feel interrogated. So they instead they would feel like you're chatting around with some friends and so on.
Talents, but also have doubt in the future and how things will pan out.
Yeah, I'm the sort of person where I think of the best case scenario. So like I have those, like I've got a very vivid imagination. So with everything that I go into, I always think of the best possible outcome, which then gives me that sort of self-confidence. But then I also have Mr. Self-Doubt on the other side, who finds the worst case scenario, and then they have a battle in my head of how I should think. And I think that's where the indecision comes from with a lot of stuff. I live with it. I'm glad I've kind of got it, because without, like, I wouldn't want to always have the self-doubt there. And I also wouldn't ever always want to have the self-confidence there, because I think that would make me a completely different person, maybe a person that I don't like either. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. There's yeah, I have both.
That's the thing with the self-doubt. If it's just a little bit too high, and I learned this actually from a guest on this podcast called Nir Ayal. He wrote a book on why we get distracted and ultimately like why we procrastinate on things. And he says procrastination is the result of us trying to avoid a task or thing that we have psychological discomfort associated with.
Yeah.
So when you're like, you've got the essay to do, you'll end up doing the washing up because that's the task you're competent in. Whereas with the essay, there's loads of research to do. You're not necessarily, you don't feel comfortable starting yet. Yeah. There's something missing. So there's
exactly why I procrastinated in making this video.
Psychological discomfort. So you just go do the dishes.
Yeah.
And I think self-doubt is one of the things that leads us to have that psychological discomfort where we just kind of delay it and wait for that perfect time or go do the dishes.
I have that all the time. I always say it's because I'm creative. It's like I get scared. I don't know if scared's the right word, but I put it off. Like if I know I've got something I want to do that is creative and requires a lot of sort of sitting around thinking beforehand, then putting pen to paper or anything that's going to involve the creative process, I delay it. And I think it's a thing of like, what if I start doing it and instantly I don't like it, and I'm like, this is not how I imagined. Because you sort of, in your mind, you have this version of it's all going to come flowing out of the pen, or you're going to start filming something and it's all going to go perfect plan, and it doesn't. And it very, very often does it all just completely flow. And I think that kind of puts a block in. I'm always like, if I'm going to do it, I need to make sure everything's prepared beforehand.
That is very interesting. A lot of the time as well, we say to ourselves that the reason I'm not starting it, or the reason I have that procrastination, is because I'm a perfectionist. I really want, everyone loves that because it's a nice way of framing yourself as having really high standards and being honestly, it's kind of like saying I'm the reason I've not started it yet, or the reason I struggle.
Again, he brings himself down to the same level of the person he's interviewing. He's sharing how or what he feels when he's procrastinating about something. It's because he tells himself that he's a perfectionist. So it's almost like saying to Joe that, hey, here I am, I'm sitting on the mud with you.
It's because I'm amazing.
Yeah.
It's almost like saying that when really, a lot of the time, it's probably self-doubt and that psychological discomfort associated with you don't feel fully competent or like you could fully nail it, and you're trying to avoid the mess, which we all encounter as we do anything.
Yeah, I think it's kind of like that. I think it's from that part of my brain that's like...
Now, this happens a lot. After he empathizes, after he kind of shares a little bit of the same struggle that he would like to dig deeper, the person that he's interviewing, notice Joe here, he kind of confers right away, pick up where he left off without even being asked a question.
Seeing the best possible outcome. So like, let's say for example, I'm doing a painting. In my head, I'll have that thing of like almost going ahead because of my imagination. I see it finished, and I'm like, it's going to be amazing. It's going to, I'm going to post it online, and people are going to love it, and things like that. But then I start, and it doesn't quite go. I'm like, oh, actually, this is in my mind. I've gone through this process of like doing it over and over again and getting it to how I want it to go, and then I start doing it. It's not going how I imagined it, and that sort of scares me a bit. And that's why I think I put things off more from that kind of side.
Unfinished paintings?
Yeah, a lot of them. Too many of them.
What have you learned about... Is there anything that you've learned or anything that's helped you get past that initial hesitancy of procrastination? Or because, reading through your story and even speaking to you today, even before we started recording, I was like, God, this guy's got so many ideas.
I was going to say, that is something that I've struggled with, especially nowadays where like going into things like business, like starting businesses and stuff. I feel like from what I've seen, very rarely do you see people that are doing so many different things. And it is that thing of like, I'm a plate spinner. Like I love spinning plates of different things and trying to keep up with these spinning plates. And I take time to sort of sit back and look at these things and think, when are you going to sit on one thing and actually just do that thing and devote your... Because you see, like, you look throughout history of like artists and people who have devoted their whole life to sculpting. Do you know what I mean? And I sort of tell myself I'm not going to achieve anything sort of near that if I don't dedicate my whole life to one thing. But for me, I just find it so difficult because I'm like, I've got a limited time and I want to dip my toe into everything. And it's weird because I feel like I use this analogy, and I don't know if it's a great analogy or not, but with the YouTube sort of career that I've had over the last 10 years, that is something that I did sort of double down on and really focus all my energy on at one point. But then it became a point of branching it out and doing different things, just as a form of like stability as well, because we didn't know, back in those days we didn't know how long it's going to last for, so we did sort of branch out to different things. And I think I just got a bit carried away with the branching out, and I was like, there's so many things to sort of see and try out and do. I see like that YouTube thing of like going out to sea and catching a wave and caught that wave in. And it was incredible. It was a record-breaking wave. It was a major wave kind of thing, and and now I feel like I'm back out on my board again, and I'm paddling around. I've caught a few little waves, but they've not been like another, ripper of a wave like the YouTube one was yet. But I'm sort of like, I know that there's more big waves out there. But it's just kind of like knowing which wave you start paddling. Like how surfers sort of start to paddle out trying to catch them, and you watch them, they sort of get it and then doesn't go. And it's like, I feel like at the moment I'm sort of paddling out and sort of waiting for that sort of next big wave, in a sense.
Why do you need a next big wave?
Good point. I should just stay on the beach. I think that's actually what I have a therapist I speak to, and I use that analogy with her, and she said, but it's the exact same thing. Why do you need to catch the next big wave? Why not stay on the beach. You don't need to go out and constantly catch big waves.
I was thinking this because you said earlier, I mean, the question I was going to ask before you talked about the wave analogy was kind of similar, which is, if you're happy spinning multiple plates and trying lots of things and sculpting for the joy of sculpting, it seems like, and this is, I'm guilty of this in the biggest way, it seems like there's this other narrative which is saying, no. Forget what you love doing, focus, because success is the most important thing.
Yeah.
And when I say success, I mean like accomplishment.
Yeah.
Because real success probably is actually being happy.
Yeah.
And you're happy. Like, but it's almost like we deny ourselves of happiness because there's not a gold medal there, or there's not a gazillion followers there.
Yeah.
But you're enjoying sculpting.
Yeah.
For the sake of sculpting.
It's like a punishment of yourself. Like, I feel like in a way, it's kind of like a form of like, Joe, you know you love doing this and this makes you genuinely happy, so why don't you just do it? Do you know what I mean? And if you love it that much and you stick at it and do it, then good things may come from it, but it's not going to happen straight away. And it's almost like I get into a thing of like, I like to sort of, the things that I know I love doing, I put aside, and I focus on the things that that maybe I don't love as much or not as passionate about as much. But I'll sort of almost put that before the little things that make me really happy. It's bizarre.
Wow.
I have no idea. I've tried to like think about it a lot, and it's weird that it comes from I don't know where it comes from.
Because are you saying because those things you could be, although you might not love them as much, you might be able to be successful in the eyes of the world in them, or? I
think it's because I've got that thing in me that's looking for instant success and stuff, which is weird, and maybe that's because of, like, before on YouTube and stuff, there was a time where, you know, we were, I say we, like speaking for myself, but like me and a lot of the people around at the similar time that on that sort of wave that we were on, we all, everything we sort of would go into almost became an instant success in a way. It was like, yeah, I think it's because we, like, back then, I felt like it was so much bigger. Anything you sort of went into, you know, it did end up sort of getting attention and doing really well and things, whereas now maybe not so much. And I think that's kind of
crazy. We signed some YouTubers back in those days, so maybe not because you were very, very early, but
yeah.
In 2013-14 we signed a bunch of YouTubers,
yeah.
And still to this day none of them were near the size of you and that sort of British cohort of like YouTube megastars, but still to this day and they must have been 18, 19, 20 years old. I still think it ruined their lives.
Yeah.
Because I watched an 18-year-old, 19-year-old kid who had started a YouTube channel, got to 200,000, 300,000 subscribers when there was no video. That was the only shop in town for video.
Yeah,
just before Facebook video and Instagram and Snap and Twitter video.
Yeah.
So that was where, as brands, we were just pumping all the money into these YouTubers.
Yeah.
I watched those kids turn down 15 grand to show up to a fucking movie premiere.
Yeah.
Or to just show face. When that wave comes into shore and hits the beach and it's over, those kids are in a psychological trap almost with their own personal expectations of the world, and I really worry about that because success can be a curse because of the way it messes with our own personal expectations of ourselves and of the world.
Yeah.
And in some respects, that sounds like what you're saying. Your expectations back then, everything you guys touched did turn to gold. Yeah. Now you're saying it's a little bit more difficult.
Yeah. Bronze.
Yeah. Does any of that resonate with you?
100%. Yeah, I think that's a big part of why myself and Casper is also a YouTuber. We started a management company because in the future there's going to be kids. I mean, we already see it then, like young kids that will shooting to fame overnight. But even I think nowadays with other social medias, it happens even quicker. Like the rise, but also the fall can happen so quick. And I was like, for me and Casper, we want to make a management company. A big role of what we have in that is being, in a way, kind of like mentors when needed to for any questions they have or anything any concerns they have about that kind of thing. We can sort of give. I kind of use it as like I guess like the Hunger Games. That guy who's like sat on the train and sort of takes her through it and be like, look, this is going to happen. I guess like a
mentor,
a very different version. Kind of like mentor kind of role.
Yeah.
And that, for me, is like one of the best things that I do at the moment is having that sort of one-on-one with our own clients, and sort of if they've got any sort of issues, being able to actually offer advice and see it make a change.
I'm Joe at 19,
yeah,
and you're Joe at 30.
right.
What do you say to me? I'm about to, as you were, I'm thinking about uploading that first video.
Yeah.
What advice would you give me?
I would say, if you want it to get to that level, you can do it. If you put in the sort of the consistency and you're making stuff that is going to get seen and stuff, but just be prepared for. There's other sides of it that aren't all bells and whistles and that kind of thing. There's going to be obstacles. There's going to be things that you're going to need advice on, and we're going to be here to help and hold your hand through that if you need it.
What are the things that are wrong?
Press, negative press. Haters. You're going to get trolls. That's the bigger your audience size, the more issues it brings in terms of the more eyes that are on you, the more people that will watch your stuff that may not like what you do, and then they've got a thing out against you, and there's a lot.
What's the mental cost?
I would say that if you're me, it's still worth it. It's still, don't ever regret doing it. It's still worth it. Like there of course there's negatives, but the positives that you've gained out of it, or you will gain out of it, in everything, outweighs the negative. And don't get bogged down by the negatives, because there's more there's more there's going to be more positives than negatives. The negatives don't matter as much as you think they're going to matter at the time. At the time when you experience these negatives and these things that don't go your way, or that's going to happen, but don't dwell on it. Don't let it consume you, because there's positives beyond that, and you'll look back and you won't regret it.
What is the worst thing that's going to happen to me?
The worst thing that's going to happen to you
over the next 10 years. So I'm 19 years old. You know how it all plays out.
Yeah. Overthinking and worrying about what other people, how they perceive you.
What cost is that going to have?
2 sleepless nights, a lot of anxiety, self-doubt.
I'm guessing at 19 years old, Joe didn't know what anxiety was.
No.
What is it?
It's a feeling of claustrophobia, feeling a bit trapped.
Do you remember days through that period? I mean, you talked a little bit in the book about, I think, 2015 or so, a couple of years in. I mean, so you said earlier you started at 19, 20 years old. By 22, am I correct to say that you had about 6 million subscribers?
Possibly, yeah.
That's fucking nuts.
It happened really quick. I was very fortunate that my sister Zoe, sort of, and Alfie actually, her partner, they really encouraged me to do it. Before YouTube, we used to buy blank cassette tapes and make our own radio shows, or I guess podcasts back in the day. Like, as like kids, we were always taking our parents' camcorder and recording shows. And Zoe was very much like the leader in that. She was very much sort of the director, let's say, and I was always the sort of I just did what she told me to. Like, I was the little brother that would just go along with it and that kind of thing. And so when YouTube came around, she started to get a bit of success from it, and she was like, you should give this a go, because it's the kind of stuff that we were doing as kids or have done. We're kind of like, it's not that far off from what we used to do, but there's an audience that can watch you from around the world, so I gave it a go, and it I think back then the success of like some of the stuff we filmed back then it'd be like a drop in the ocean now in terms of like how big social media's got and YouTube and stuff. Our stuff wouldn't be watched nowadays. It was like we were very much kind of hit it at the right time, and so I started, and it just sort of snowballed, and it snowballed really quickly. I remember there was a time where I was still thatching on a roof 5 days of the week, and then had an email come through asking if I'd fly out to Los Angeles to interview Simon Cowell. And I flew out there, and it was all first time ever experiencing a business class flight. I still had like straw in my shoes from like being on the roof, and like hadn't showered, like kind of like just grotty Thatcher, getting on this plane, like a chauffeur driven car pulled up to our house and took me off to the Heathrow airport, and I went through there's like a little secret bit where they put these barriers down. You have your own like private security kind of thing, and you go through, and I was like, it just blew my mind. And I hadn't even got to Los Angeles yet. First time ever flying on my own, like solo, and that whole experience was just like, the whole thing just didn't feel real. Just did not feel real. It just felt like I was sort of like living like a double life in a way of like, like yesterday I was on a roof thatching, and now I'm sat in Simon Cowell's fancy house, sort of talking to him about Skype.
Those experiences, especially when they're really quick, they go from 0 to 100. People, when I sit here with them, often talk to me about imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
Because, as you said, you're kind of living a double life. You're
Yeah.
like, what the fuck am I doing?
Yeah.
I'm destroying my shoe and Simon Cowell. And
Definitely, yeah. Imposter syndrome, there's definitely a lot of that going on.
and that must result in overthinking and doubt and
Yeah.
all those things we talked
Yeah,
about.
and that's another thing actually that I would say to younger Joe is that you're going to get this thing called imposter syndrome. You'll learn about it later, but yeah, it'll be there. And I've had that even now to this day. Like even sort of like
Now he's really opening up after that much of empathizing from Steven's side, or maybe, I hate to use this word, but it's almost like grooming, if you will, in which he conditioned the person he's interviewing to be comfortable. But of course, I meant this in a positive sense. Now Joe is really opening up about that imposter syndrome, and the fact that he still feels it even now when he was being interviewed.
even now with this podcast, like I listen to this podcast all the time, and even on the way here, I was a bit nervous because I was like, you get like these incredible CEOs on and these people that are so good at talking, and I struggle to get a sentence together most of the time, and I'm like, I feel like there's people on there that have done such amazing things, and I'm like, even for me, it still gives me that little bit of imposter syndrome of like, there should be other people, there's a lot more people that should be sat in this chair rather than me.
What's the risk of that? Because, I imagine a lot of people, for me the risk is you end up like avoiding like opportunities in life and stuff, because I'm sure there must have been people that we've asked to come on this podcast before that through imposter syndrome said no. I think because we do get a lot of people come here and they'll say a similar thing. I can think of a few people who literally came here and was like, I don't know why you've asked me to be here.
Mm.
And that must impact performance. It must make the whole thing unpleasant. I mean, at least the lead up anyway.
Yeah.
Until I'm such a,
It does, yeah. I think like a good example for me is doing Strictly, or even actually probably even more so is Waitress in the West End. So
Yeah.
I did a stint on the West End in Waitress, and this was coming off the back of doing Strictly. So my confidence actually it completely changed me in a sense that it gave me such a big boost of confidence, which I hadn't had for a long time. And so riding on that confidence, I agreed to do an audition for Ogie and Waitress in the West End. And I remember I kept asking my team, being like, have they asked me because of like Strictly, or will they be honest, and like if I'm not good enough, will they just tell? I don't want them to sort of put me in it if I'm actually not good, or I'm not to standard that they'd take someone on. Do you know what I mean? If it's not me. And they were sort of like, I think you'll just go along, you'll go, this kind of stuff. And I remember even after doing the audition, they said they really loved it and things like that. In my mind, I was still like, but did you though? What, like, are you sure? Like, are you sure? And especially like the backlash that I kind of got from that was quite like, I mean, it's nothing that sort of worried me too much, but there was a lot of like people that were messaging me being like, you don't deserve this. There's people that have trained their entire lives in musical theatre, and they didn't get that, they won't ever get that opportunity because people like you coming in taking those roles. And so I started to have like a massive, and that kind of like that imposter syndrome I already had got amplified, and I was like, maybe I shouldn't do it, and just sort of. But then I wonder if there's been any times where people have then turned around and said, actually, do you know what, I don't want this because of what people on social media have said, do you know what I mean, or given their opinion on. So that was a real sort of, that was definitely a moment that stands out to me of being like, I probably should be here doing this.
In your journey with social media and YouTube, was there a moment where you go, that was where I really started to see the symptoms of getting burnt out by doing this? Was there a year or a time where you just thought, fuck, I don't want to open my emails, I don't want to upload?
Yeah, it was, I think, around 2016, 17, I think it might be. I remember it clearly, so it was just a time where there was just a lot going on. I think YouTube was like massive. We were, you know, I think at the time I had 3 YouTube channels that I was trying to all keep up at the same time. And this was actually before I was doing it all solo as well. So I'd think of the ideas, I'd shoot them all, edit them, obviously distribute it, I guess kind of in a way market it by promoting it, putting it out there and trying to get people to watch my stuff. But I also had a book coming out which I was working on. Me and Casper did a feature with BBC Studios, like a sort of like a straight to DVD kind of like film of us sort of travelling around in a camper van. So there's a lot of things going on, and obviously lots of other different things in the background. And it got to a point where I was like, my life as a roof thatcher before all this there was no feeling like this, how I'm feeling now. It was just, I had such a solid structure, like up at this time, go to work until this time, go back, unload the straw, load up the van again, go and see my nan, give her the paper, go home, go to the gym, and then that was it.
Was that your life?
There's been a lot of times throughout my life where I've looked back and thought, that was like, I think it is because that structure, it does make you feel like I was living a more,
Hand on heart, do you think if you'd never started YouTube you'd be happier overall over the last 10 years? Hand on heart.
I think I'm more happy the route I've gone down as well. I think, because the thing is, I can never sort of, as much as, you know, I've had my struggles online and stuff, actually the online has also been such a big help for me, and especially like in terms of like YouTube and the way that I've worked with them and personally and like had support from them has been incredible. So I'm very fortunate as a creator on YouTube that YouTube's actually given me a lot of support, and I've had a good team around me that have given me the support. And the friendships and the family that I've had around me, although I went through a time.
And so what Joe says here really resonates with me, is that the online world is kind of really an amplification of what we encounter in real daily physical lives. Is such a hyper-connected world in which you would feel all the pains but also all the support more acutely. So it's like real life in steroids, if you will.
Well, I did struggle a lot, and I had that burnout, and I had that sort of anxiety and worry and self-doubt and stuff. I've had a really good set of people around me that have helped me sort of get past that. Even with the roof thatching, you know, I look back on it now because I'm so far down a different path. But if I went back to thatching, I'm sure there were times where I'd be up on the roof when it's like sideways rain, wind, freezing cold, thinking like, what am I doing up here? Like, so I think it's all sort of comparative to where you are at certain points in your life.
Did your love for YouTube shift though? Because obviously you start posting less frequently on your main channel. To the point where it's funny because as someone that's kind of observed the whole YouTube journey over the years, there seems to have been this point which you've literally spoken about where multiple YouTubers appear to have kind of vanished a little bit, and then they end up posting a video saying, like almost giving their reason why, saying they're going to come back. There's another one a year later saying they're going to come back, and they never come back. What is going on?
I think, I mean, I can't speak for everyone, but for myself personally, I think it's partly because my audience have all grown up, or the audience I had back then, they've all got older. They're all in their sort of, I've seen a lot of ones started watching me when they were 14, 15. They're all now in their 20s. They've got their own stuff going on, and the stuff that I knew how to make back then is not what they want to consume now as content. It's what I sort of gauge from it.
Well, I have a guess as well, which is, I think, very much in line with what you're saying. I think that the algorithm might have changed a little bit.
Yeah.
And I think a few things happen when that happens. So I think as a creator, you get psychologically demotivated.
Yeah.
When you're doing the same work and you're getting a vote from your audience to say, which sounds like we don't like it anymore.
Yeah.
And then it seemed like that happened all at the same time with that initial sort of YouTube cohort. And so a lot of them, because they saw declining numbers in whatever they were making, decided to try other formats and other things and go into other places. I remember back in the day, like, YouTube seemed to be much shorter form videos.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And now you have a lot of long form stuff, a lot of 55-minute, hour Joe Rogan, 3-hour videos on there.
Yes, there's always like rumours that go around being like, oh, have you heard the latest? This is what now, this is what the algorithm wants and stuff. And I agree with that to a degree, but I also think you've got the people that take it to the extreme sometimes, and like, the reason why I'm not doing this is because of this. And I never want to solely blame it. I think that's why I don't always blame it on an algorithm. This might go back to me being the sort of self-doubting kind of imposter syndrome type vibe again, of thinking like, it's not just because of this mechanical thing that goes on in the background, it's also because I need to switch things up and change my, who I am online or what I'm doing online. I need to shift what I'm doing with the times, and I think that's harder than I thought when I was sort of like, I'm going to change my stuff now, and I think it's more difficult than I thought.
Was there a point where you saw numbers decline and you thought, where you start to think, wait a minute, this is not how it used to be?
Yeah.
When was that?
It was right before I said yes to doing Strictly. I thought, it'll be fine, I'll get used to it and try different content and things. And I started to post different stuff, and it just wasn't performing as well as it used to. And I'd always kind of like prepared myself for it. Like, my dad actually gave me a good piece of advice, looking back on it, of being like, what you're doing now is great, but in the future it's only going to get more and more people trying to do what you do, and there's going to be people. There's always people out there that have new talents and stuff, and it's going to change over time. And there's going to be people that come into this that have got, not saying that. There's going to be people that come into it that have got super talent and stuff that's completely dominate and things. And so, unless you've really got something about you, you're gonna struggle to keep up, because it's just gonna get bigger and bigger. And I kind of like, I look back now and I'm like, actually, a lot of what he said makes sense. There is, that's the sort of way it's gone.
How do you define yourself now? Who are you now? Like, from a self-definition point. Not that that's something I like to do to myself. I don't like to self-define. But if someone asks you to write a bio, what'd you say?
It's one of the hardest things for me to answer. It genuinely is. If I'm ever asked to sort of sum myself up what I do, I think it's like my Instagram bio is like, I am creative or something like that. So I find it so hard to sort of pigeonhole myself as this is what I do and this is what I am. So I'd say like, it's difficult. I just like to say I'm just a creative person.
I am so excited to announce our new sponsor for this podcast, and that is Blue Jeans by Verizon. For any of you that aren't already familiar,
all sort of looking for things to keep us busy, and I, like we mentioned before, I love hobbies. I'm always looking for things to do, and I had like a balcony that ran off from my living area, and I got into gardening in that small little balcony of the things that I could do at the time, the things I had lying around. I got really into it, and it's like sort of like caring for a plant. I'm just trying to make a plant grow, or putting time and effort into something else, and sort of not being in the sort of the whirlwind that's going on online on our phones and stuff at that time. disconnecting myself from that and sort of reconnecting myself with something as simple as nature made me feel so good. It took away all kind of like anxieties. I just felt very calm and very like, it took me back to my childhood in a sense of like how I grew up. I was very lucky to grow up in a little cottage type place. So getting all that thoughts, it's part memoir. Like I talk a lot about like growing up in the countryside and sort of things actually living in London and all that kind of stuff, but also a part practical guide of hopefully giving some tips for other people in terms of like how they can find their own balance that suits them in terms of the real world and social media world.
It's quite a personal pivot, isn't it, going from being a YouTuber who's uploading across 3 YouTube channels and is glued to a screen to standing here holding these pots.
Yeah, I know it is very different. I think, but that's kind of like how I've been. I like to separate out those two things, and what I've realised is separating those two things out is really beneficial for me. But it's in no way sort of saying that social media is bad and this kind of thing. You shouldn't be on social media because like it's a tool that we all use and we kind of like need to use. Like in terms of like we've got a personal computer in our hands. It's kind of like an extension of our arm. We use it for so many things. So it's not saying like don't use your phone is evil. It's more kind of like finding a balance that's right for you, that is going to help you feel better about yourself mentally.
On that point of thinking, mental health has become an increasing conversation over the last 10 years. Social media has kind of sat in the middle of that debate. Being someone that started a big social media business, I talk about this a lot. And obviously, people, when we talk about social media and mental health, they'll say, well, you made all your money from it. So, and my rebuttal is always the same, which is, if I spent 10 years within it, and I knew there was something wrong and I didn't tell you,
Yeah.
I'd make me even more of an asshole, right?
Yeah.
Just because it had made me money. So having been very deep in social media over the last 10 years, I think we're probably more qualified than most to talk about the impacts it has on us, the mind, for better and for worse. When you were going through your hard times with social media, when you were having those real anxious moments where you've written a few things about how there was about a 2-year period when you'd really got going, where you just had this overwhelming sensation that felt like it was impossible to escape. Were you telling anybody about it? Were you talking to people? Were you speaking to Zoe, your family, and saying, I'm getting anxiety right now?
Yeah, more so my sister, because my sister has suffered with it a lot throughout her career. So I found it. I was very lucky that I could speak to her about it, and obviously got a therapist as well that was recommended to me through my sister.
Do you remember that first time you spoke to her about it?
She was very good about it, to be fair, because she's been through a lot of that stuff. She sort of straight away made me feel better in knowing that, at least sort of acknowledging what it is and then bringing some sort of understanding to it. But it definitely helped having someone so close to me like my sister being able to sort of help with that.
And you spoke to a therapist about this?
Yes.
Going to see a therapist has a lot of stigma surrounding it. So especially men are often very reluctant to do that, because I think, especially once upon a time, going and seeing a therapist meant that I was crazy.
Oh, yeah.
So your journey to actually getting into therapy, can you talk to me about that process and what pushed you ultimately to take that step?
Yeah, I think for me I never saw it as a sort of, I don't know whether it's because of my sister, once again, like through everything sort of, in a way, sort of paving the way through that, of like being like, she was seeing a therapist. So I already felt like, well, if my big sister can do it, then I can. Do you know what I mean? If she can do it, I can do it. So I was quite lucky in a sense that it was actually a very easy process for me.
What has therapy done for you, practically? Is there anything you go, it really helped me with that particular challenge that I had?
It's made me realise that I am I've got a thing about people pleasing, I'm a people pleaser. So I often feel like I can't be my unapologetic self in a situation without...
Again, I keep saying this over and over again, but now we kind of reach a place where where Joe is really comfortable to be really vulnerable, admitting all his shortcomings and really saying it without doubt or without fear of showing his true self. In this case, he mentioned about he being a people pleaser.
Risking causing offence to someone. I'm like terrified of upsetting someone or saying the wrong thing. I'm learning through therapy that how to sort of manage that and to acknowledge it first and foremost, and then to sort of, and we're working on that at the moment of trying to sort of work on like why I have this thing of being worried so much about what other people think about what I do.
It's a tough business to be in if you have that as a kind of predisposition. Has your therapist been able to offer you any advice about overthinking at all?
Yes. More so in like the sort of anxiety side of things. There was I think 2 or 3, and it's like decatastrophizing the catastrophe, using time to separate. So like if I'm feeling anxious, I've got a sort of, the way you think about time helps. For example, I was at Chelsea Flower Show recently with my mum, and I was engaged in conversation with someone else, but my mind was thinking like there's so much going on around me, and I started to feel anxious. I just needed to get out of there, and it started to make me feel sick. That I was like I couldn't leave, and I had remember I had a glass of champagne in my hand, and I was like I don't know what to do. So I was starting to think of all these different scenarios of being like I can't just be sick here because I'm in like someone's garden. I can't just like I can't just run away and leave mid-conversation because I'm so worried about going to them. Sorry, I can't listen to what you're saying right now because my mind is panicking. I need to go. I was so worried about how they would think of me. So it's like all that going on. But what I've learned is that if you take that and think this conversation is max going to last 5 minutes, that helps. And it's like, know that after those 5 minutes, you can walk over there and you can be on your own and you can do this kind of stuff, and it's going to help. So it's like kind of like if you're going into something that you think, oh, this is going to be a 5-hour thing or like a 2-hour exam, you break it down into like chunks. So it's like I've got, okay, this 2-hour exam is 4 30-minute chunks, and that starts to make me feel less anxious about things, and then also sort of thinking ahead of that whole thing. So you've got an exam thinking, well, after this, I'm going to go and do this, this, and this, and this. And when you're thinking about things further in the future, it actually starts to make me feel more calm.
Diane, you met her on Strictly.
Yes. Strictly
gave you a lot, didn't it?
Yeah, it did, yeah.
What was really interesting is that was your first girlfriend.
Yeah.
That's
first
real girlfriend.
First real proper girlfriend, yeah.
At what age?
27, 26?
Yeah.
God.
I wonder if, had you met her outside of Strictly, if you would be together.
Yeah.
Because it seems like you would have done a pretty good job of overthinking your way.
We have the same conversation. We're like, how lucky it was in a way that we were even partnered together. Because when you're partnered, if we weren't even partners on the show or on the same show, we still say we may not have got together, because when you're actually with your partners, you don't see each other throughout the week. So we're like this. We sort of see it as like the stars sort of realigned there, but it wasn't. It was an odd sort of situation, I guess. It's not how I thought it would happen. I used to be quite like nervous about sort of getting a girlfriend publicly, because I would always think because at the time I had this sort of large young female demographic that were really into sort of what I did and things like that, and I was kind of like, I've seen through like friends that have got girlfriends, and when they introduce their girlfriends to their audience, it's a bit kind of like I always thought it would be a very private thing, and in my head the whole time I was like, it would be very private, and it's actually ended up being the complete opposite. It's like you can now watch the moment we met, which is kind of unusual.
It seems, from just speaking to you today and getting to know you, but it does seem like that was the perfect way for you to get past, because you were forced together.
Yeah.
And it's, you know what I mean, in the context of the show, you were forced to spend time with each other. You weren't there to fall in love, but
no.
They put you together to do this very quite intimate thing, very deep journey over many, many months.
Yeah.
And it feels like from just understanding you a little bit, that was probably the best way for you to get past a lot of that sort of talking yourself out of it.
100%. And you know what, you see I feel like in that environment anyway, especially for me, is like I feel like we saw the best and the worst in each other over that sort of 16-week period. There have been times where we go into training and like things weren't going to plan. We thought we're going home, and we, stress. The further you go in that competition, the higher the pressure is and the stress gets and things like that. So we saw the best and the worst of each other within those 16 weeks, and afterwards I was kind of like, when we even sort of like had time to really kind of sort of address things like post and be like, I actually kind of want to spend more time with you, because I felt like I've seen the best and the worst, and I can, I'm happy with that, and it's vice versa, and so yeah, that's how it sort of happened.
So the show ends.
Yeah.
You get to the final. You do very well, and then
fun.
You did the tour.
Yes.
Which a lot of people do, and they love that process as well. When did you decide that your dance partner was not just a dance partner and was a girlfriend?
It was before the tour.
Before the tour.
It was before the tour.
So after
yeah.
Strictly, but before the tour.
Yeah, it was after the show finished, and like a few days after, we had time to sort of like, we obviously missed each other because we didn't see each other. So after we were like sort of like, I do miss spending time with you and things like that. And so obviously we had a conversation, had a sort of decided to see each other more often and things like that. And we actually then went away to a place in the New Forest.
Wait a minute, that was very quick. You had a conversation on WhatsApp or in person?
No, like in person.
Okay,
yeah.
so you met up a few times in person.
Yeah,
and then straight to the forest.
And then we went to the New Forest, a little trip.
Right.
And I remember we were getting like followed, because there's a lot of like there was a lot of like attention on us at the time, I think, and so yeah, we were getting followed by a guy. Like I'm very like sort of aware of like what's going on around me and stuff. I think it's just from the career that I've had over the last 10 years. I don't know, but like I was like, that guy is part. I could see from my flat. I was like, that guy's part there. He's a paparazzi, yeah. And this is going to sound really wanky, but I was lent an Aston Martin that morning. Right. So I went down and I was like, this is the best. I do things like this more often. I get lent cars like this, and I was like, and so I went down and parked it, and he must have seen me parked in New York car to follow. And later on that day, I was driving along and I looked in the rearview mirror and I was like, I think we're being followed. And then I recognised the license plate was something to do with the car, and it put me on so much edge. I was like driving along thinking like, I actually can't concentrate on driving because I know this person is just trying to follow us. So I sort of turned off from where I was trying to go to, because I don't want to actually turn up to where we're going. So I was like trying to like shake him off a little bit. So I was like, right, Diane, you know how to work Bluetooth? So yeah, put on the James Bond theme song. And we had that moment of just like trying to sort of avoid this guy who was following us, and we did manage to do it, obviously very safely.
Did the pictures come out in the paper?
No, nothing, luckily, because we were on the move. But yeah, I remember that very clearly, of that kind of like a moment of being like, this is not what I'm used to at all. Don't know if I like this, but then yeah, that's where we sort of, that's where.
The price of fame.
You're a couple of years into the relationship now.
Yeah.
You live together, right?
Yes.
Yeah. How's it going?
Yeah, it's going good. Yeah, going really well. It's really nice because we are both.
How's it going? Really underrated sentence or question that we should ask more often to people.
Very, like, she's also one of the professional dancers, so she's still very much involved in the show, and when the show's not on, she's involved in the tours and things like that. So a lot of our time is separate, and we had one year, obviously 2019 was a year where we were like together, but we had our own stuff that we were working on. It's a very busy year for me, and also a very busy year for her with like tours, and back then even like I think they do like cruise ships and stuff as well. So like loads of different tours and stuff. So we were away a lot of the time. But then when we come together, it's so nice because we've got so much to. They say like distance makes the heart grow fonder and all that kind of stuff, and I genuinely I do believe in that. I think, especially in this sort of situation, like although we are away from each other a fair bit because of our work commitments and stuff, it works really, really well. And like when we are together, it's nice just to spend quality time together. But yeah, no, I'm absolutely loving it.
We have a closing tradition on this podcast where the previous guest asks a question for the next guest, not knowing who they're asking it for. Do you remember a moment where you realised that you loved your job? When was it and why? And was there a moment when you realised you hated your job? When was it and why?
Ooh, good question. The moment that I remember that I loved my job was there's a lot of little moments that stick out, but I think this was going back to like the old YouTube gang. So like me, my sister, Alfie, Marcus, Butler, Jim, Tanya, a lot of that kind of the Brit crew we were called back in the day. We got invited to Harry Potter World, and I'll admit I'm not the biggest Harry Potter fan, but just being around having a day out with that group, that first sort of, it's kind of like our first sort of big group out somewhere, and just being around these people, and we're all going through the same situation, which I really appreciate the fact that there's people within this group that I can chat to and speak to about what was going on, and it was such a new and exciting time, and we were all kind of on that journey up. And I just remember that memory's always stuck in my head. And there's a vlog. We all vlogged it, so it's actually been documented, so we can go back and watch it in the future and stuff. But that really sticks out.
So what about the second part of that question?
A moment where I hated my job.
Yeah.
I guess it was the time where I had that burnout feeling, and I had so much going on, and I thought, you know what, I actually don't really know if I want to do this anymore. And I remember telling my manager at the time, Alex, that I was like, I just don't know if I want to do this. There's too much going on. I actually can't really handle it. I'm thinking about my old job and how much sort of simpler that was, and thinking but I had all these things going through my head of like that thing of like, don't be ungrateful, but also I am struggling with it. And I guess in that moment would feel like the time that I hated it, but it didn't last very long because my manager at the time, Alex, she sent me a care package. She went out above and beyond and sent me this care package of like a book, and weirdly it was a Harry Potter book, which, as we know, not the biggest fan, but at the time it was exactly, like I said, it's exactly what I needed. But right before she saved the day, it was tough. Probably about that time, I think.
Joe, thank you so much. Thank you for your time. Thank you for writing a really important book. I think these kind of messages in the digital, overstimulated world we're living in, especially our generation, the generation that are coming, are very, very important, and they're very simplifying, which I love, because it's very easy to write very complex things that are that try and make things more complicated than they are in order to make yourself sound super smart, or to try and trick people to buy something, or to think you're a scientist. But I love stuff that is simplifying. It makes it much more accessible. And I think that is why I love this particular book so much. But I also really appreciate your honesty, because you're talking about topics and themes that, on one hand, very few people will ever get to experience with the crazy career that you had in YouTube, and that you're having in the media and all of these things, but also topics that are not always easy to talk about, which is the difficult, harder times, and that balance is exactly why we do what we do here. So thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. No, pleasure. Thanks for having me.
I can't wait to see what happens next. So.
Same.
I had a few words to say about one of my sponsors on this podcast, my golf.
Steven always closes with a kind of summary of his reflections of what he thinks about the conversation, but I also noticed that he always closes with praise for his conversation partners' honesty and about generally what they achieve in their life. So yeah, that kind of my takeaway after seeing this. And I don't have a lot of notes apart from what I mentioned here and there when I pause the video. I have some notes here. You can pause and read it. Points that I've taken from the conversations, both about Steven, as reflected in these bullets. Invest as much time as you need to talk with the person as opposed to talk to establish rapport and connection. And also, when you dig deeper, communicate how do you relate to the other person's idea or thinking. But also some kind of nuggets of pieces of wisdom that I gleaned from Joe. So are big waves even necessary? And hobbies are important because they are ways to ground yourself. When you mention about plant and dabbling on gardening and so on and so forth. Yeah. So there you go. I'm not gonna edit this, and I don't speak from a place of expertise because I'm not the podcast host myself, although I have a career in communication and brand. I'm just reflecting personally and trying to note down and maybe internalize some of those wisdoms that I get from this kind of content, and in this case from Diary of a CEO with Steven and Joe. So yeah, that's it. And if you like this kind of content, you can hit like and subscribe, and maybe even recommending it to your friends. That's it for this today's video, and I'm wishing you a good holiday season and Happy New Year, and see you around sometimes in 2024. Bye bye.